Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions. At question number 1, I call Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the UK Government about the impact of its Energy Profits Levy on business confidence, investment and jobs in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have had multiple discussions with my UK Government counterparts on this issue, and I have also written to the Minister directly on it. The Energy Profits Levy was always supposed to be a temporary measure introduced by the Conservative Government. We must see the earliest possible end date or complete reform of it, as it is now affecting investment and jobs in the North East, including in the low-carbon energy sector and the energy supply chain. The fiscal regime for offshore oil and gas is reserved to the UK Government, but I will continue to raise concerns with the UK Government and call upon it to bring forward at the budget a stable and long-term fiscal regime to replace the EPL and deliver business and investor certainty for the North Sea.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. Data from OE UK and Scottish Renewables shows that £40 billion of investment could be unlocked if the Energy Profits Levy is replaced. This would deliver £137 billion of GVA to the UK economy and safeguard some 160,000 jobs, and building on the 47,000 jobs and £15.5 billion output already supported by Scotland's renewable energy industry and the supply chain. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what the Scottish Government is continuing to do to persuade the UK Government to abolish the Energy Profits Levy in their forthcoming budget and replace it with a successor regime which is a focus on protecting and growing energy jobs?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Kevin Stewart for that question. The data that he cites is from a range of industry bodies, and it emphasised what I've said in response to the previous question. The offshore energy sector must be treated fairly alongside other parts of the UK economy in order to both unlock investment and ensure that workers are the heart of a just transition by protecting their jobs for as long as possible. That's why we will continue to call on the UK Government to bring forward at the budget a stable and long-term fiscal regime that will replace the EPL and deliver much-needed business and investor certainty for the North Sea.
Brief supplementary, Douglas Lumsden.
You, Presiding Officer, the EPL is destroying the oil and gas industry, but so is the SNP's presumption against oil and gas, something that the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon was celebrating again last night. So does the Cabinet Secretary not recognise that while the SNP has a presumption against oil and gas, and while the SNP won't support Rosebank or Campbell, that she has a brass neck coming here pretending to support the industry?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, our view is that climate compatibility assessments and checkpoints should form any decision that the UK Government takes on new licences, and that domestic energy security must also be a consideration. The question I'd ask Douglas Lumsden is, does he agree with his former leader, Theresa May, that the UK should be net zero by 2050? I think we all know the answer on that.
Question number 2, Carol Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the progress of the Ayrshire Growth Deal.
Minister Ivan McKee.
Significant effort has been made by partners across the Ayrshire Growth Deal to accelerate delivery of this important programme, which will see the Scottish Government invest over £100 million in Ayrshire. Construction is now underway on the £35 million Ayrshire Innovation Park, which will support the advanced manufacturing, engineering and food and drink sectors. Phase 1 of the £14 million Great Harbour project is nearing completion, and both the Scottish and UK governments recently approved a request from partners to progress a new approach for the Prestwick proposition, paving the way for significant investment to support the Prestwick cluster.
Carol Mochan.
Thank you. Can I thank the Minister for that answer? Can the Government tell us why it's only 5% of the £251 million allocated to the project in 2020 that has been spent? We have also recently seen the cancellation of projects such as the Prestwick Spaceport. I wonder if the Minister has considered appointing an independent chair to push the project along.
Minister.
Well, of course, the whole point of the growth deal is that local partners have a key role in making decisions, and the government will, of course, continue to fund the projects, make the funds available, and will work with local partners to make sure that we can do all we can to ensure that projects are taken forward. But as I say, it's the whole point of the deal is that local input is hugely important, and the local partners have got a key role to play.
Brief supplementary, Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week I met with a community group with a particular interest in restoring the Pilot House. Whilst the Pilot House appeared in plans for the Great Harbour and Maritime Mile in Irvine, I understand an expected feasibility study on restoring it may now not be funded. Does the Minister, like me, recognise the potential of protecting unique heritage like the Pilot House? And further to that, where communities' expectations and aspirations are raised around growth deals, that it's crucial that those are met?
Minister.
I understand that the Great Harbour project, which has been led by North Ayrshire Council, intends to deliver improvements to both the setting and facade of the Pilot House as part of the wider project, which aims to create a unique waterfront destination at Irvine. The specifics of the feasibility study support for Pilot House is not something the Scottish Government has been closely involved in, but I will instruct officials to speak with the Council directly to learn more about this issue and provide the member with a response by correspondence.
Thank you. Question number 3, Keith Brown.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what action it is taking to safeguard the future of the Alloa campus of Forth Valley College.
Minister Ben McPherson.
The Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills and I met the Principal of Forth Valley College and the Scottish Funding Council last week to discuss progress, next steps and how the Scottish Government can help further to safeguard the future of the Alloa campus. I am assured that the Principal is committed to finding a solution, taking into account the needs of the community, local employers and the wider region. The SFC is supporting those efforts by providing additional funding to support an urgent feasibility study to identify all possible options for the campus, and we will ensure that all relevant public sector bodies play their part in that. I also plan to visit the Alloa campus very soon, and I will endeavour to keep Mr Brown updated.
Keith Brown.
Given the vital role that further education colleges such as Forth Valley College play in improving opportunities and life chances for people from our most deprived communities, and Clackmannanshire have some most deprived communities in Scotland, would the Scottish Government support the Scottish Funding Council placing requirements on colleges to ensure a minimum level of course provision in these areas, for example, by mandating that a set number of credits are delivered from campuses such as Alloa, and that similar safeguards are applied consistently across Scotland? And will he ask the Funding Council to meet with me so that I can make clear to them the extent to which we are having to deal with a college board which is determined to end further education provision in Scotland, and what can be done to stop them?
Minister.
I think Keith Brown raises some important points and has advocated for his constituents in Alloa so admirably in the recent weeks on these issues. I would be happy to impress upon the Funding Council to meet with Mr Brown. I would also be happy to meet with Mr Brown to explore the ideas that he has raised in the Chamber today. The Scottish Government absolutely recognises the vital role that our colleges play in their local communities, and we will sustain our investment in the sector and remain committed to giving young people and others who are retraining the opportunity to gain skills needed to succeed and help in our economy, and to help that grow and prosper, and to be able to do so in their locality.
Alec Crowley.
Presiding Officer, there's been a campus in the Alloa area since the 1960s. It would be a disaster if the Alloa campus closed. Does the Minister recognise the massive financial pressures that are on colleges, and will he do more to ensure the future of colleges in Clackmannanshire but across the whole of the country?
Minister.
For raising those important points, and as I have articulated in the Chamber in recent weeks, I and the Scottish Government do recognise the challenges that our college sector face, and the various publications that have been put out in recent weeks regarding that. I would be keen to work with all members, including himself, across the Chamber on how we create a sustainable future for our colleges, given the important role that they play in communities, addressing poverty and in the future of our economy. And I've been most grateful for the excellent constructive engagement I've had so far with Colleges Scotland on how we support our college sector in the period ahead.
Question number 4, Sandesh Gulhane.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made regarding the number of households whose council tax bills could rise as a result of the proposals in its consultation on the future of the council tax.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The consultation on the future of council tax does not set out a specific proposal for change, and these scenarios are not government policy. The consultation instead seeks views on a range of illustrative options aimed at building a consensus. Independent analysis by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, published alongside the consultation, provides a detailed assessment of those models. The IFS also modelled a number of transitional and mitigation schemes which would each impact on the overall assessment of the different models, and I would encourage the member to read the IFS report.
Sandesh Gulhane.
Glaswegians with a bandy property have seen their council tax increase 42% since the SNP came to power. 42%. This SNP government starves councils, leading to serious cuts in services and people paying more and getting less. These people are not rich, and many struggle to get by. Take Morag in my constituency, who is a single widow pensioner living in a home for 50 years. She can't afford to pay more on her fixed pension income. Does the Minister think it is right to continue to hammer these people?
Minister.
Well, I don't know, but the member may have forgotten the many years of council tax freeze that were implemented by the Scottish Government, and council tax bills in Scotland. Council tax bills in Scotland are many hundreds of pounds cheaper than they are south of the border, where his party was in control for most of that period, significantly so in terms of the savings for Scottish council taxpayers. So I think the member should really reflect on that, and also reflect on the fact that his party are never shy to stand up and ask for more investment, but always do so at the same time as calling for tax cuts, which clearly demonstrates their fiscal inability to understand fiscal matters.
Question number 5, George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure the sustainability of town centres.
Minister Ivan McKee.
We are committed, the Scottish Government, to supporting vibrant, thriving towns and town centres, putting them at the heart of investment and planning decisions through the Town Centre First principle and delivery of the Town Centre Action Plan. National Planning Framework 4 further embeds this approach by recognising town centres as national assets. Over recent years, support for town centre regeneration has been backed by our regeneration capital investment programmes, as well as our support for Scotland's Towns Partnership and the Scotland Loves Local programme. And this is continuing in 25-26 with regeneration investment of over £62 million, which includes support for town centres. And I was delighted to speak last night at the cross-party group on towns and town centres, and recognising great work happening across the country, including, of course, Paisley, which has been recognised as Scotland's Town of the Year.
George Adam.
I thank the Minister for his answer, and I wasn't going to mention that because I mentioned it last week. But The Minister will be aware of the major regeneration work that is currently underway in Paisley Town Centre, including plans to explore future use for the Paisley Centre site. This week, Renfrewshire Council confirmed it will work with the developer to move this important project forward. Can the Minister commit to engaging with Renfrewshire Council once their proposals are ready to help ensure the best possible outcome for Paisley?
Minister.
We're always keen to ensure the best possible outcome for Paisley and indeed towns across Scotland. I'm aware of the plans that have been put forward by the owners of the Paisley Centre, and the Scottish Government remains in close contact with both the local council and the developer Beyond Retail on these ambitious plans. I understand discussions are ongoing between the developer and Renfrewshire Council to understand the feasibility and viability of the project and to seek assurance over the proposed development plans. And as you will be aware, any decision rests with Renfrewshire Council in the first instance, but the Scottish Government will closely follow this project as it moves forward.
Thank you. Question number 6, Douglas Lumsden.
Whether it plans to increase the current threshold of 50 megawatts for approval by its Energy Consents Unit of onshore electricity generating stations to allow more decisions to be taken by local planning authorities.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government will consult on increasing the current threshold of 50 megawatts for applications for onshore electricity generating stations to be considered by local authorities. In addition to this, we will also consult on our new regulatory powers over the Electricity Act applications through the UK Government's Planning and Infrastructure Bill. These new powers will enable changes to be made to address many of the concerns raised by local communities, provide earlier, more structured engagement opportunities and better alignment with local planning procedures.
Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding Officer, decisions like the 500 megawatt battery storage plant at Rothay-Norman should be taken by local planning authorities. So before the Cabinet Secretary jets off on her latest taxpayer-funded jaunt to sell Scotland's countryside to the highest bidder, will she explain Will she explain to constituents in Aberdeenshire East why local democracy is being ignored and energy projects are being decided by central belt eco-zealot bureaucrats who are not answerable to local residents?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, what to say to that? Energy decisions around consents are made by local authorities under a threshold, and they're made by the Scottish Government over a threshold. There are regulations that are put in place to determine the processes that are undertaken. Those are regulated by the UK Government. I was about to say I look forward to reading Douglas Lumsden's submission to the consultation, but after that diatribe I don't know if I am.
Let's not be shouting at one another. Question number 7, Neil Bibby.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of school swimming provision, including the number of children who leave primary school unable to swim.
Minister Natalie Dawn-Innes.
The Scottish Government believes that every child should be given the opportunity to learn to swim. It is a life skill that can save lives. There is currently no requirement to report a child's swimming ability, either locally or nationally, but Scottish Swimming estimate that 25 to 30% of children leave primary school unable to swim. School swimming reduces poverty-related barriers for children and has a significant role to play in addressing inequalities. So we are continuing to work with key stakeholders to ensure all children have the opportunity to become confident, safer and competent swimmers.
Neil Bibby.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Research from Scottish Swimming has found that only 16% of community swimming lesson participants come from the 20% most deprived areas in Scotland, and the cost of lessons has more than doubled since 2018. Cost or access should not be a barrier to a life-saving skill, yet thousands of children are missing out on crucial water safety skills. Last year there were 33 accidental drownings in Scotland. As well as the tragic loss of life, one drowning is estimated by the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents to cost £1.7 million. It is estimated that investing in school swimming would cost only £6 million. Can I ask the Scottish Government when it will take this matter seriously and make the National Primary School Swimming Framework a priority to ensure that every child in Scotland gets access to this life-saving skill?
Minister.
Well, Mr Bibby picks a couple of points there. So, in relation to water safety, the Scottish Government continues to fund ROSPA to provide operational support to Water Safety Scotland to lead a coordinated and preventative approach to water safety. In relation to the school swimming framework, the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care and Ms Todd have met with Scottish Swimming to discuss the framework. It still remains an ambition to double the sports budget before the end of this Parliament, and should this be delivered, we would envisage the Scottish Government supporting the implementation of the school swimming framework nationwide, because we understand how important it is for children to have these opportunities in both an aspect of safety and also for future life opportunities.
A brief question number 8, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with North Lanarkshire Council regarding the reported coal spoil fire in Shawhead Coatbridge, and any assurances that can be given to the public.
Cabinet Secretary.
My officials have been in touch with the North Lanarkshire Council and have been updated on the progress which has been made towards safely resolving the underground smouldering at the site in Coatbridge. Work has been led by specialist environmental engineers in close coordination with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Air quality monitoring is carried out daily. Latest monitoring results show air quality levels will remain well within safe limits. An independent analysis confirms no exceedances of health-based thresholds. Residents in the immediate area have received regular updates via letter, the Council website and social media.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. I'd also like to thank and highlight the work of North Lanarkshire Council in this fairly unusual and rare situation. They have been very proactive, and indeed I have an update meeting next week with the Chief Officer responsible and the local ward councillors. Given that the situation isn't common, the most pressing concern for people in the area is whether the emissions they are experiencing are safe. Can the Scottish Government provide any further assurances that the treatment of such coal spoil fires do not impact on the health of residents? And does the Cabinet Secretary believe there is scope for public education here to prevent such fires occurring again in the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I said in my first answer, they're doing everything to suppress the smoke. Additional sand continues to be used effectively to suppress smoke and smouldering. Thermal imaging and temperature mapping confirms that the smouldering remains contained. And contractors and geotechnical specialists remain on site daily, with regular meetings taking place between Scottish Fire and Rescue Service as part of the process.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. I now invite members to join me in welcoming to the gallery Kenneth G. Fosland, First Deputy Speaker of the Swedish Parliament, and Julia Cronlid, Second Deputy Speaker of the Swedish Parliament. Thank you. And before we move to First Minister's questions, party leaders will make some remarks before remembrance, and I call the First Minister.
Presiding Officer, this Sunday we once again pause to remember those brave men and women who so selflessly laid down their lives to protect our country and to provide us with the freedoms and the security that we enjoy today. In our shared moment of silence, in the poppies that we wear, in parades and in solemn ceremonies, we honour their courage and their sacrifice. We will always remember who they were and what they did for us, countless men and women who fought to protect and preserve our democratic way of life. And so, alongside our acts of remembrance over this coming week, let us commit ourselves once again to those same fundamental values that define who we are as a nation. We do that so that their great sacrifice may never be in vain.
Thank you. I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On Remembrance Sunday, our nation will stand in collective silence to remember the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice to defend our country and our freedom. The powerful symbol of our remembrance is the poppy which grew on the battlefields of the First World War. Now, I had the recent privilege of visiting Lady Haig's poppy factory in Edinburgh. The veterans who work there have seen service in every British military campaign since the early 1970s. And it was an honour to talk with them about conflict, loss and remembrance. And they want us to remember not just on one day, but every day. And not only those who served in the past, but those serving now. Our remembrance is about history and about respecting those who keep us safe today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In the coming days, we'll mark Remembrance Day, a time when we reflect on the heroic sacrifices made by armed forces across World War I, World War II, and since in defence of our freedoms, our democracy, and also in highlighting the struggle against fascism, both in the Second World War but against the forces that seek to divide us today. And we should also remember those that continue to serve in our armed forces and make a commitment to them that we will protect them and their families both while they serve but also after they retire from service. But it's also an opportunity for us to redouble our commitment to peace and to freedom for all right across the globe. So let us remember all those that have made the ultimate sacrifice. Let us redouble our commitment to all those that continue to serve, and let's remember those and say that their service will never, ever be forgotten.
I call Ross Greer.
Thank you. Sunday is a time to remember. It's a time to remember and to mourn every victim of war, and we should always remember that civilians bear a particularly heavy price. But it is also a time for us to honour those who fought and died for us, particularly in the fight against fascism. It's a day to remember and to give thanks, but also to recommit to preventing a repeat of the darkest periods of our history. As has just been mentioned, the politics of hate and division are on the rise again today. So we honour the sacrifice of those who were forced to defeat that by force of arms in our past. But we also need to work to ensure that no generation is ever forced to do so again.
I call Willie Rennie.
This moment must never be routine. As the years passed, it's natural that the sheer enormity of the horror of the First and Second World War diminishes. But as those years pass, the more important it is that we all stand together to make these simple but powerful points that we will never forget their sacrifice, because it was horrific. Every family was affected right across the land. So the more the years pass, the more we must stand together, the more we must never forget those sacrifices and the commitment that we make never to repeat that again.
Thank you. We move to our next item of business, which is First Minister's questions, and I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, President Officer. Rachel Reeves is going to raise taxes. Is John Swinney going to do the same?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, obviously there has been a huge amount of speculation about the United Kingdom Government's budget. The Scottish Government will set out our position on tax in the budget on the 13th of January, and we will obviously be considering all of the issues and the implications of the United Kingdom Government's budget in November.
Russell Finlay.
Well, Labour are breaking promise after promise. Rachel Reeves called last year's budget, and I quote, a once-in-a-Parliament event. She claimed she would not be coming back with more tax rises this year. She claimed that she would stick to her manifesto promise not to raise income tax, not to hit working people with higher bills. But that's exactly what Labour are set to do. If John Swinney won't rule out tax rises, does he think that they're right to increase income tax?
First Minister.
Decisions have to be taken very carefully on tax issues, and the Chancellor will be accountable for the decisions that she makes, and the Scottish Government will take our decisions accordingly and respond. I would observe that the decision taken in the budget last year, to which Mr Finlay has referred, to increase employers' national insurance contributions has had a profoundly damaging effect on the economy in a whole variety of different areas, whether that's about increasing the cost of employment, which for a government that is apparently focused on a growth agenda, it's an absurd policy decision to have taken, because the decision to increase employers' national insurance contributions is stifling growth in our country today.
Russell Finlay.
Entirely with the First Minister about the employees' national insurance contributions, but he doesn't seem to know if he supports Labour's tax rises or not. So I'd like to remind him what he said after last year's UK budget, and I quote, "The UK Government should have increased income tax, and it will be a hammer blow to Scottish workers. We've got two left-wing parties that only want to tax, tax, tax. Labour are doing the same as the SNP have done for the past decade. Most workers in Scotland pay more than those in the rest of the UK who do the same job and earn the same amount." The SNP have increased taxes, driven away aspirational workers, damaged business confidence and held back Scotland's economy. People
Let's hear Mr. Finlay.
deserve a break. So will John Swinney give a cast-iron guarantee of no further tax rises, income, business and property in the Scottish budget?
First Minister.
Well, Mr Finlay won't be surprised to hear me say that these questions will be answered in the budget when the Scottish Government sets out to Parliament the commitments that we are going to make. And of course, we have asked some people in Scotland to pay more in taxation, but what I would say is that the Independent Scottish Fiscal Commission has confirmed that the majority of taxpayers in Scotland are set to pay less than they would elsewhere in the United Kingdom this year. So that's the judgment of the Independent Scottish Fiscal Commission. Now, of course, the public finances that we put in place as a consequence of our decisions pay for different provisions here in Scotland. They mean that there are no tuition fees paid in our universities by university students. They mean that there is free bus travel for under-22s. They mean that there are no prescription charges levied in Scotland. They mean that the Scottish Child Payment is helping to keep children out of poverty, with a falling level of child poverty in Scotland. So yes, there are tax issues to be confronted, but there are also public expenditure decisions that are improving the lives of people in Scotland today.
Russell Finlay.
Well, John Swinney is spinning like a washing machine. Last month, he accused me of misleading Parliament about what I said, and in doing so, he misled Parliament. And he's at it again today. I'll say it once more. More Scottish workers pay more income tax than those in the rest of the UK. And John Swinney's answers today won't assure any Scottish worker, homeowner or business owner. He won't rule out increasing the tax on buying a home. He won't rule out raising taxes on businesses. And it seems that he's plotting yet another income tax raid on hard-working Scots. And on top of all that, the SNP plan could result in massive rises to council tax, reportedly as high as £6,500 a year. Raising taxes every year is not sustainable. Workers and businesses can't afford it. People deserve to keep more of their own hard-earned cash. So shouldn't John Swinney be looking to bring bills down, not hiking them higher year after year after year?
First Minister.
I'd simply point out to Russell Finlay that the council tax in Scotland is lower on average than it is in properties in England, and that's happened. That's the position today, where the council tax is much lower. And as I've said in my earlier answer, the majority of taxpayers in Scotland are set to pay less than they would elsewhere in the United Kingdom this year, and that's according to the Independent Fiscal Commission in Scotland. Now, what my government will do is what we've always done, which is we will bring forward orderly budget provisions which will relate to the tax and spending commitments, so that we can fund our public services and fund the investments in the Scottish economy. And of course, what we have heard from Russell Finlay and the Conservatives on a consistent period of time is that they are not prepared to engage in the tough judgments about delivering for public services. They keep on asking for more money, but they won't take the decisions to enable money to take place. That is pure and utter hypocrisy, and it's what we get from the Conservatives.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Let me start by welcoming the First Minister's change of heart on holding an investigation into Scotland's maternity services. Less than 24 hours ago, after the heartbreaking testimony of mothers, he whipped his MSPs to vote against that investigation. But I'm glad he went home and thought again. Unfortunately, the situation in maternity services is just a snapshot of the crisis and chaos in our NHS. Scotland's ambulance service is also in crisis. This week we heard about Queen's Park defender Charlie Fox. Charlie suffered a serious knee injury during a match at Firhill Stadium, a 3 p.m. kick-off. An ambulance was called, but it didn't arrive until 1 a.m, nearly 10 hours later. 10 hours lying in pain. and is just weeks after footballer Brooke Patterson was left abandoned on the pitch waiting for an ambulance. So what does John Swinney say to Charlie, to Brooke and all other Scots waiting in pain?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I'm very open with Parliament about when there are occasions when public services do not meet the reasonable and legitimate expectations of members of the public. In relation to the Brooke Patterson case, I looked into that, and the examination of the information that was available to me was there had been an error made in the classification of that call. That is regrettable, and I have apologised in writing to Brooke Patterson. In relation to the case of Charlie Fox, the length of time appears to me to be completely unacceptable that he was left to wait. The Scottish Ambulance Service are investigating the circumstances behind the incident, and I apologise for the length of time that Charlie Fox experienced in waiting for the ambulance. I would say that our public services continue to operate under enormous pressure, but they also deliver fantastic service to members of the public in most cases. Not in all cases, and where they don't deliver for all cases, they can expect the First Minister to address those issues and to apologise accordingly.
Anna Sarwar.
Week after week, John Swinney comes, apologises for the government's performance, and things continue to get worse. A month ago, he apologised for long ambulance waits, but apologies simply won't cut it anymore. When Scots call 999, they expect help to come. That's what David McClenaghan expected when he had a heart attack. He called for help and he gave his address, but when the ambulance arrived, the crew never even got out. David was later found dead on the floor. That was 7 years ago, and a fatal accident inquiry is now underway. But since then, response times have got worse. 10 years ago, 83% of life-threatening cases saw an ambulance arrive in 10 minutes. When David McClenaghan died 7 years ago, it had fallen to just 73%. Now it's 61%. That is shocking. So why is this situation continuing to get worse and worse on John Swinney's watch? And don't simply stand up and say you're sorry.
Through the Chair, always. First Minister.
I recognise that there will be occasions in which public services do not meet the expectations of members of the public. And I think the right thing to do, and no matter what Mr Sarwar puts to me and how he characterises my responses, I will be honest and open with the public in apologising where those standards are not met. What I can say is that Scottish Ambulance Service staffing is up by 31% in the last 10 years, that we have more paramedics, they're up by 57.6% in the last 10 years. And what I can also say is that median response times for purple calls was 7 minutes 51 seconds on the most recent data that's available to me. So there is, and that information is relevant and important because it will relate to the optimum time for the delivery of a response by the Scottish Ambulance Service. So our staff are working with more resources, under incredible demands to meet the expectations for members of the public, and in the overwhelming majority of cases in the country, that is exactly what they do.
Anna Sarwar.
That's the First Minister's response to hearing that 10 years ago, 83% of life-threatening cases saw an ambulance arrive in 10 minutes. 7 years ago, it was 73%, and now it's only 61%. That is putting lives at risk right across the country. And John Swinney and the SNP are failing our NHS and failing the people of Scotland every single day. On his watch, we have an ambulance crisis putting lives in danger, a patient waiting over 4 years for cardiology and neurosurgery consultations, another patient waiting 6 years for general surgery, a child waiting 5.5 years for surgery, and shockingly, one Scot waiting 8 years to be seen. 8 years. That's 5 SNP Health Secretaries. That's 3 SNP First Ministers. It's even a new King and a new Pope, but still no treatment.
So enough of the apologies, because they simply won't cut it anymore. Doesn't this prove that Scotland's NHS can't risk a third decade of this tired and incompetent SNP government?
First Minister.
As I've said, Presiding Officer, where there are failings in our public services, I will honestly and candidly accept them and be held to account for them. But equally, I will set out to Parliament the progress that has been made under my leadership in improving the performance of the National Health Service. So Mr Sarwar has cited issues about long waits, and I've looked very closely at long waits along with the Health Secretary. In a whole range of individual cases, there can be significant complexities and health implications which make it impossible for particular procedures to be taken forward because of the vulnerability of patients involved. In general, however, there are too many people waiting too long, which is why we now have reductions in the size of waiting lists. That is why we have reductions in long waits as well, with all of the long waits categories of 12 months, 24 months, 36 months coming down. We also see an increase in the number of procedures being undertaken within the National Health Service. What that means is that more people are being treated and more procedures are being delivered. And of course, in the last year, as I've told Parliament before, and just so that Mr Sarwar doesn't forget about it, we had a record number of hip and knee operations last year, demonstrating the progress that the National Health Service is making under my leadership. I'm determined to deliver for the people of Scotland. That's what the initiatives and the investment that we are making is delivering, and we intend to ensure that's applicable in every part of the country for the people of our country.
Question number 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you. The fossil fuel giant Equinor has submitted a new application to drill for more oil in the North Sea. But this time they've had to admit...
Let's be courteous.
This time, Presiding Officer, they've had to admit that the Rosebank oil field will be 50 times more polluting than what they first claimed. 250 million tonnes of carbon emissions, accelerating climate breakdown and destroying our hopes of keeping our planet safe. The First Minister's predecessors were crystal clear in their opposition to Rosebank. Nicola Sturgeon agreed that it would be the greatest act of environmental vandalism of her lifetime. Humza Yousaf said that approving the field was the wrong decision. But John Swinney has so far avoided taking a position, and he's quietly ditched the Scottish Government's energy strategy, the first draft of which opposed new oil and gas exploration. The science is clear. If we are to have any hope of changing course and preventing total climate breakdown, there can be no new oil and gas fields. Does the First Minister agree with Nicola Sturgeon that it would be the greatest act of environmental vandalism in our lifetime? Will he oppose the Rosebank oil field?
First Minister.
So the approach that the Scottish Government has taken consistently through the work of my term as First Minister, the term of Humza Yousaf and also Nicola Sturgeon, was to insist upon the importance of a climate compatibility assessment about any development that comes forward. That is, of course, the position that has essentially been adopted in legal judgments that require the United Kingdom Government to go through the process they are currently going through in relation to the applications that are coming forward. So that is the point of consistency, that there needs to be any developments of oil and gas licensing have to be compatible with our journey to net zero. And the importance of that point is the fact, and I think this is very widely accepted, and I think members of the Green Party accept this, there will be for some time a requirement to utilise fossil fuels as we transition from our current situation to net zero. And the question that has to be addressed, given the requirements of society in that respect, is can any of that activity be compatible with our journey to net zero? And that's the policy position of the Scottish Government.
Ross Greer.
I asked the First Minister a yes or no question, but I didn't get an answer to it. Both of his predecessors were capable of giving a clear answer to that question. He says it's a question of climate compatibility, but Equinor have just admitted Rosebank would be 250 million tonnes of new carbon emissions. That is clearly incompatible with any chance of meeting our climate ambitions. However the First Minister spins it, approving Rosebank would be a disaster for people and planet. It will do nothing to reduce energy bills. All it will do is funnel more money into the pockets of Equinor's super-rich shareholders. And every single penny these mega polluters and governments sink into new oil and gas projects takes us even further away from the investment in renewables that we really need. The two most recent former First Ministers were brave enough to say this, but today the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, demanded the UK Government and these planet-wrecking corporations a tax cut. The First Minister needs to pick a side, so I ask him again, will he oppose the Rosebank oil field?
First Minister.
Well, I think people will generally see me to be on Scotland's side in everything that I do. I have to be.
First Minister, sorry, I'm finding it difficult to hear here, and I know that those who have gathered in the gallery with us today would like to hear whoever is called to speak. First Minister.
And I have to be mindful, Presiding Officer, of the fact that we are delivering a just transition. Not any old transition, a just transition. A just transition that enables me to look at the staff of oil and gas companies in the eye and say that we are doing everything to manage the transition to avoid the industrial devastation that Scotland experienced under the mercenary actions of the Conservative Government in the 1980s, which I will not repeat. So the Scottish Government recognises, and I've explained in my first answer to Mr Greer, that there will be a need for the utilisation of some oil and gas resources for the foreseeable future. That has to be undertaken in a way that is compatible with our journey to net zero, and that is the approach the Scottish Government will take.
Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what discussions the Scottish Government has had with the UK Government regarding the implementation of the proposed scheme for the renovation of military homes in Scotland.
First Minister.
President Officer, when I provided evidence on behalf of the Scottish Government to the UK Government's Strategic Defence Review, I raised the fact that the quality and maintenance of service accommodation is a major concern for service families based in Scotland, and that the United Kingdom Government should ensure our service personnel and their families live in accommodation that is fit for purpose. Plans for this investment were initially announced in the Strategic Defence Review earlier this year, and to date there has been no discussions on the renovation of Ministry of Defence-owned housing in Scotland.
Christine Graham.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. And firstly, can I state, Presiding Officer, I am delighted that at last the UK Government is set on remedying the state of some military housing. And as one who represents Glencorse Barracks in my constituency, I am well aware how tough it is already for families of servicemen and women who have not a settled home, being nomadic on account of their partners' posting. So the very least they deserve is decent accommodation. So a big tick for that. However, in the recently published 124-page UK Defence Housing Strategy, there are only 4 references to devolved nations, and the use of surplus MOD land for civilian housing takes us straight into devolved competencies. So at paragraph 313, I quote, "It is important that the Defence Housing Service works in a collaborative way across the UK Government devolved governments." It appears, First Minister, there hasn't been any collaboration. Is there going to be any, or is this again trampling over devolved powers?
First Minister.
President, all I can say to Christine Graham is that the Scottish Government would be very willing to take forward discussions with the UK Government, but there have been no discussions with the Ministry of Defence on their proposals on the funding of the renovation of military housing. The Scottish Government stands ready to do that because of the important issues of community connection that Christine Graham raises, and I can assure her that the Government is willing to take part in those discussions.
Question number 5, Douglas Womsden.
To ask the First Minister when the Scottish Government will announce a timetable for improvement works on the A96 north of Inverurie following the publication of its Corridor Review consultation report.
First Minister.
So the Scottish Government's position is that it is committed to fully dualling the A96. The feedback received following the publication of the draft corridor review outcomes, a summary of which was published in June, will help to inform the final decision on how best to take forward improvements while recognising the current economic challenges. Future decisions will be shaped by available and planned budgets, which will be influenced by the UK Government's autumn budget and the forthcoming Scottish Government Infrastructure Investment Plan, which will be published in the new year.
Douglas Lumsden.
First Minister, the North East has been named Scotland's road death capital after 24 people were killed and a further 384 were injured across the region last year. Since the SNP first promised to dual the A96 under Alex Salmond's government in 2011, there have been no less than 16 Transport Secretaries and Ministers, all of whom have kicked the can down the road. So will the First Minister give us an answer today? Stop playing games with the lives of motorists in the North East and finally honour his party's 2011 promise of fully dualling the A96.
First Minister.
A range of different measures have been taken by ministers to address the issues of safety on the A96. I recognise there remain significant challenges there, but ministers are fully engaged in that particular question. In relation to the capital investment programme, the Government, of course, will be setting out to Parliament in January the infrastructure investment plans and the issues that we can take forward within the current fiscal context, and that information will be shared with Parliament and subject to the usual scrutiny.
Thank you. Question number 6, Michael Mara.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the Auditor-General's report 24-25 audit of the Scottish Government consolidated accounts, which indicates a £1 billion underspend by the Scottish Government.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I welcome Audit Scotland's unqualified opinion and the points raised by the Auditor-General, which recognise the underspend does not represent a loss of spending power to Scotland.
Michael Mara.
This knackered SNP government's handling of the public's money is a disaster for Scotland, and the Auditor-General could not be clearer on that point. Labour has delivered an additional £5.2 billion for Scotland's services.
Let's hear Mr Mara.
Mr Swinney ludicrously labelled that a continuation of austerity. We now know that he underspent that budget by £1 billion, while 1 in 6 Scots suffer in pain on NHS waiting lists. First Minister, where on earth has the rest of the money gone?
Through the chair, always. First Minister.
If that was an explanation of the intellectual capability of the aspiring Labour Finance Secretary, then Scotland has got a lot of trouble coming its way if Mr Mara is anywhere near the public finances. Mr Mara has been a member of this Parliament. Indeed, he's a member of the Finance Committee. He should have some idea of what he's talking about, but he's just demonstrated to Parliament he doesn't have a clue about the public finances. Not a single penny of the underspend announced in the annual accounts of the Scottish Government, which I repeat were unqualified, which is the case for every single year of this government's term in office since 2007-8, every year an unqualified opinion, and Mr Mara doesn't understand that the resources that are contained in the underspend are all used in this current financial year, all allocated supporting the reductions in waiting lists that I'm presiding over, providing for the expansion of social security, including the Scottish Child Payment, and also, just for absolute completeness to Mr Mara, £247 million of the underspend cannot be used for public services in Scotland because it's part of the United Kingdom's control of the budget. So I suggest Mr Mara goes away and gets a book about elementary accounting before he asks me any more questions.
Thank you. Question number 7. Thank you. Beatrice Wishart.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the recent news that Eastern Airways, which runs Lifeline regional services in the Highlands and Islands, has entered administration.
First Minister.
Officer, the decision by Eastern Airways to file a notice of intention to appoint administrators is a matter of significant concern and will have a significant impact on communities and businesses. I understand this will be a worrying time for the airline staff, including those who are based at Sunborough Airport in Shetland. Should individuals be facing redundancy, the Scottish Government will provide support through our initiative for responding to redundancy situations, Partnership Action for Continuing Employment. Individuals can access support online or by calling the helpline. Advice for affected customers is also available on the Highland Council website.
Beatrice Wishart.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. The news about Eastern Airways will be devastating to over 330 workers facing redundancy, including 9 people in my constituency. The Wick to Aberdeen PSO is a lifeline route for people in the far north, and passengers need assurances now about its future. The First Minister is also aware that Sunborough Airport and its proximity to the offshore energy sector is a vital part of that North Sea connectivity network. So can he indicate what discussions the Government has had about both an alternative airline for the PSO route and transport for oil workers? And will he commit to a statement from the Scottish Government outlining its approach to the impact of Eastern Airways' collapse?
First Minister.
I recognise the significant practical issues that Beatrice Wishart raises today. The PSO for Aberdeen to Wick is a Highland Council PSO, and we are engaged with Highland Council on trying to find alternative solutions to the situation and are in regular contact with Highland Council. There have been measures put in place about alternative transport arrangements, but I do accept that the Aberdeen to Wick link is very important to the local community. So we are working with Highland Council to establish what alternatives can be brought forward, and of course I'd be very happy for members to be kept updated by the Minister on this particular issue.
Grant.
One of the issues with the link was the unreliability of the aircraft, and people were not maybe using the link as much as they should have done had it been more reliable. I wonder if the Scottish Government's given any consideration to doing the same thing as they did in Barra when the aircraft was unreliable, by purchasing aircraft and then leasing it out to an operator so that the service is reliable and can be used.
First Minister.
Well, I'm very happy to explore particular issues. As I said in my answer to Beatrice Wishart, the PSO for Wick Aberdeen is Highland Council PSO. Obviously the PSO with Barra is a Scottish Government PSO. No, it's not. Oh, I'm being corrected. But let me say, I'll take the issue away and see, and we'll explore what are the possibilities, because I do acknowledge that the connections are important and the distances involved for other transport mechanisms are very significant for members of the public. But we'll explore the idea that Rhoda Grant has put to me.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The UK Government recently announced £547 million for Wales as part of its local growth fund to be delivered directly by the Welsh Government. If this is a union of equals, surely Scotland must receive its consequential share. Can the First Minister confirm if the Scottish Government has received any detail as to whether this funding will be replicated in Scotland, or is Scotland being shortchanged yet again?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, this is an issue that relates to the successor funds to the European funding, which of course has been strategically of the greatest significance to Scotland over many years and has helped us with a whole range of different priorities, particularly in relation to employability and the delivery of local infrastructure. Now, what the UK Government has done is essentially provide a sum of £547 million to the Welsh Assembly Government, but it proposes to bypass the Scottish Government in deploying those resources in Scotland. This is an issue which has been raised by the Finance Secretary with the United Kingdom Government. I think the responses have been unsatisfactory, as have the details from the UK Government about the direct connection they establish with local authorities, where, frankly, the information is woefully presented to local authorities. But the key point here, which is the point that Mr Gibson raises with me, is this Labour Government in the UK is bypassing the democratic procedures here in Scotland. It's another example that the Labour Government in the United Kingdom is a government that is determined to undermine this Parliament, and people in Scotland need to waken up to the threat from the UK Labour Government.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Is the First Minister aware of the swingeing budget cuts being proposed by SNP-run Dumfries and Galloway Council? These include the closure of the Hillview Leisure Centre in Gulhane, removing free music classes from children, and cuts which would result in the closure of the entire Citizens Advice Bureau network. So will the First Minister look the people of Dumfries and Galloway in the eye and answer this question? Why are these cuts being proposed? Is it because the SNP government here in Edinburgh is not properly funding Dumfries and Galloway Council? Or is it because this SNP-run administration is not properly managing its finances?
First Minister.
The local government settlement provides a record funding settlement of over £15.1 billion, an increase of over £1 billion, or 5.5% in real terms compared to 2024-25. And local authorities have got to look at all of the choices and issues that affect the delivery of public services, and that's exactly what Dumfries and Galloway Council will be doing. I would point out that the administration in Dumfries and Galloway is led by my party. I'm very proud of the work of my party leadership in Dumfries and Galloway. They have taken over from the Conservatives. And, of course, as usual, everyone that takes over from the Conservatives has got to clean up the mess that the Conservatives leave behind them. And lastly, Presiding Officer, let me just say to Mr Hoy, it's a bit rich, Mr Hoy, coming to this Parliament asking for more money for local government when he's not even prepared to vote for the money that we've put in place in the first place. It's yet more hypocrisy from the Conservatives.
Martin Whitfield.
Grateful, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of the Chief Constable's comments this week to Criminal Justice Committee that reports of online child abuse have more than doubled in the past year. Children First Chief Executive Mary Glasgow has said that Scotland is, quote, sleepwalking into the digital destruction of childhood. So can I ask the First Minister, how will the young people of Scotland see the commitment of the First Minister and his government to meet this crisis? And how will the Scottish Government draw on children's services, education, child protection, justice, third sector and technology companies to solve this crisis?
First Minister.
Well, I acknowledge the seriousness of the point raised with me by Martin Whitfield and also the comments made by the Chief Constable. And, of course, Police Scotland have adapted and changed their presence and the composition of their staff to make sure they've got more capability to interrupt the networks that Mr Whitfield has put to us. I pay tribute to Police Scotland in that respect. The National Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation Strategic Group, which comprises operational partners, including Police Scotland, is taking forward a series of priorities and actions to effectively prevent, disrupt and provide support to victims of child sexual abuse and their families. So I assure Mr Whitfield of the determination of my government to work with all relevant partners, including Mary Glasgow, who I met yesterday and who's a fantastic individual and advocate on behalf of children, that we will do everything in our powers to address this situation. But, and I don't make this point in any way pejoratively, I make it deadly seriously, the regulation of social media companies is the preserve of the United Kingdom Government and Ofcom. And I will be the most trenchant supporter of the toughest measures that we can put in place, the United Kingdom Government will put in place to regulate these individuals and organisations. Now, there are steps being taken forward by the UK Government in its Online Safety Act, but I do say that we will be prepared to work with the UK Government to maximise the effectiveness of those measures. We will take all the actions we can. I assure Mr Whitfield of that. But we also need to have the toughest stance on these organisations, because there is a lawlessness out there online. It's damaging our children and it has got to be arrested.
Audrey Nicholl.
A recent report from Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce has found that 1 in 4 businesses in the North East have cut jobs as a result of the UK Labour Government's fiscal regime. So does the First Minister agree with me that the UK Labour Government must urgently change course to protect the supply chain and local jobs? And can I ask, what steps can the Scottish Government take to protect industry and livelihoods in the North East?
First Minister.
President Officer, as I recounted in my answers to Mr Greer, there is some really significant economic challenge coming to individuals who are employed in the North Sea oil and gas sector, which is why the issues that are raised by Audrey Nicholl are so serious. There is obviously the opportunity for us to build the renewable industries and the clean energies of the future, and the Scottish Government is taking that forward. But we have to do that. We have to make sure there is an alignment between that activity and the activities in relation to the oil and gas sector. Now, the Energy Profits Levy, which has been a key part of UK Government interventions, was always supposed to be a temporary measure. I think anyone looking at the performance of the Energy Profits Levy will demonstrate that it is contributing, that there are significant issues about its performance in relation to the public finances of the United Kingdom, and it's also having an effect on the oil and gas sector. So we have to, and employment in the oil and gas sector. So there has to be a very careful reassessment of the Energy Profits Levy, and I encourage the UK Government to do so.
Finlay Carson.
Presiding Officer, last week a receptionist in a local GP surgery in my constituency of Galloway had to call 999 for an ambulance for a patient. It took over 55 minutes for that call to be answered. And when it was, they were told there would be a 4-hour wait for an ambulance. And that doesn't take into consideration the 1-hour drive to the nearest A&E. First Minister, can you imagine being with a loved one who's suffered a heart attack or a stroke or an asthma attack and having to wait almost an hour just to have that call answered? So what reassurance can you give my constituents that they can expect a fit-for-purpose emergency response, both in getting through to 99 and receiving a timely ambulance care? Because there's no way that this is an emergency response. So what urgent action will you take to stop such unacceptable delays?
Through the Chair, please. First Minister.
Well, if Mr Carston wants to furnish me with the details of the specific case, I will examine it, because certainly that length of time in waiting for a call to be answered sounds to me to be completely unacceptable. So if Mr Carston gives me those details, I'll look at them. What I would say to him is that the median response time for purple calls was 7 minutes 51 seconds, and the ambulance service will work extremely hard to make sure it meets the expectations of the public.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week, my constituent waited for over 6 hours after presenting at A&E with significant blood loss and in severe pain. Not only was he left for hours, he was kept on a plastic chair with no blanket or no pain relief. Having lost blood, he was extremely cold and could have become hypothermic. Another constituent attended A&E following gallbladder removal. She had been vomiting, was in agony, and hadn't been to the toilet for ages. She was left sitting in a corridor without pain relief or medical attention for an entire day. They don't need apologies, First Minister. They need action. So can I ask the First Minister, what specific action will he take to ensure that my constituents get seen quickly and are warm, comfortable and given appropriate pain relief and not abandoned in a corridor to fend for themselves whilst they wait?
First Minister.
President, the action that I take is the action I take every single week, which is I meet with the leadership of the National Health Service to press for the strongest possible performance in our National Health Service. And as I explained to Mr Sarwar a moment ago, the fruits of that activity is that we now see falling waiting lists, we see a reduction in long waits, we see more people being treated within our National Health Service, and that will be the focus of my attention. Just on Tuesday, I met, along with the Health Secretary, with the Chief Executives of all of the National Health Service boards around the country to reiterate the importance of timely attention to scheduled and unscheduled care, and it's unscheduled care that Pam Duncan-Glancy is raising with me, and that was the subject of discussion along with maternity issues with the Health Service leadership, and that will continue to be my focus.
Michael Matheson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister is aware that energy bills across Scotland have risen yet again. This increase has been partly caused by the UK Labour Government's costly nuclear tax that we are now paying for Sizewell C, the world's most expensive nuclear plant. It's estimated that this will cost Scottish households something in the region of £300 million over the course of the next decade alone. Can the First Minister advise what assessment has the Scottish Government made of the impact that this will have on Scottish households? And does he agree with me that further expansion of nuclear power will simply not only bring environmental risks, but also the risk of pushing up energy prices even further?
First Minister.
So this issue lies at the heart of the choices that are to be made about our energy future. It's why I believe that expanding our renewables, storage, hydrogen and carbon capture activities will help us to build an affordable, resilient and clean energy system. And that's why I do not support the development of nuclear power resources in Scotland, because I think they are expensive and we have alternative sources that are much cheaper. And of course, the practical effect of all of this is that a Labour government that pledged to cut bills by £300 has presided over an increase of bills of £190 since the time of the general election. So let's just hear that again. The Labour government promised to reduce bills by £300 and they've gone up by £190. No wonder the people of this country don't trust the Labour Party in Scotland.
Thank you. I'm going to take two further brief supplementaries. Stephen Kerr.
Presiding Officer, earlier this week I wrote to the First Minister urging the Scottish Government to support the Public Office Accountability Bill, the so-called Hillsborough Law, and to bring forward a legislative consent motion so that its provisions can be fully applied to Scotland. The bill, which is now past its second reading in the House of Commons, establishes a statutory duty of candour for all in public office and guarantees parity of legal representation and non-means-tested legal aid for families impacted by state failures. Will the First Minister ensure families in Scotland are not left at a disadvantage in seeking truth and justice?
First Minister.
The Scottish Government is in dialogue with the UK Government about this bill. In principle, we are supportive of the bill. We've obviously got to go through the process of consideration around legislative consent, which the Scottish Government will do in a timorous fashion, and of course Parliament will be engaged in the consideration of that legislative consent. But I do think it is important that the principles and the values enshrined in that bill are taken forward.
Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, Cameron Barracks in Inverness is close to the city centre. It's near two schools and it lies in a residential area. Many constituents harbour serious concerns about the Home Office plans to house up to 300 unchecked males of whatever colour, concerns not born of racism. So, will the First Minister do something that he has not done so far? Will he publicly and expressly call on the UK Government to rethink these proposals, to abandon Cameron Barracks' location, and to work positively with the UK Government to come up with a fair, reasonable, suitable location which many people of compassion in Inverness feel is the right approach?
First Minister.
So, I want to assure Mr Ewing that we are engaging constructively with the United Kingdom Government on the issue of housing of asylum seekers, and particularly in relation to the Cameron Barracks proposal. The Social Justice Secretary answered a question in Parliament in some detail on this issue, and set out the importance of dialogue to ensure that the very legitimate issues and practical concerns that I understand will be debated today by the Highland Council are properly and fully addressed. Now, the Social Justice Secretary had a conversation with the UK Government on Tuesday morning, in which we've set out to the UK Government the range of practical questions that have got to be explored to address the understandable issues that Mr Ewing is raising on behalf of his constituents. But I have to say, and I say this just for transparency with Parliament, there is no substantive, detailed response to the legitimate points that are being put forward. Now, that's the starting point for any consideration of this issue. There must be substantive engagement on the issues of substance so that members of the public in the Inverness area, or the Highland Council, or the Scottish Government can come to a conclusion about an issue that's got to be addressed. I have asylum seekers who are housed in my own constituency, and they are supported with appropriate support arrangements right in the heart of my constituency in the city of Perth. So I recognise this task has got to be undertaken, but there has to be good, substantive engagement with communities and public authorities, and regrettably in relation to Cameron Barracks, that has been completely absent from the United Kingdom Government.
That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Audrey Nicholl, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.